Lisa Carter had always believed in hard work. She was the kind of person who never shied away from extra shifts, always greeted customers with a smile, and treated everyone with kindness. At 26 years old, Lisa had been working as a waitress at LeBlanc Bistro, an upscale restaurant in downtown Los Angeles, for nearly 3 years. Though the pay wasn't great, she needed the job to support her younger brother, who was in college, and her mother, who had health issues. Despite her dedication, Lisa often felt like she was walking on eggshells at work. The restaurant's manager, Richard Whitmore, was a strict and condescending man who never missed an opportunity to remind Lisa of her place. He favored the wealthier customers and the white staff members, treating them with far more respect than he ever did Lisa and the few other minority employees. Still, Lisa pushed through each day with patience, ignoring the subtle jabs and unnecessary criticisms. That evening, Lisa arrived at the restaurant right on time, tying her apron around her waist as she stepped onto the dining floor. The bistro was packed with high-profile guests, businessmen, and socialites, all enjoying their lavish meals under the dim chandeliers. Lisa picked up her notepad and went straight to work. She balanced trays of wine glasses, served steaming plates of food, and made sure her tables were satisfied. "Lisa," Richard snapped from across the restaurant. "Table 7's been waiting too long for their drinks. Move faster." "Yes, sir," she responded, biting back the irritation in her voice. She hurried to the bar to grab the drinks, but just as she turned to deliver them, the front door swung open, and in walked a tall, muscular man wearing a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Lisa's eyes widened slightly. Even with the cap, there was no mistaking that signature broad smile and powerful frame. It was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Dwayne Johnson wasn't just any celebrity. He was one of the biggest movie stars in the world, a former wrestling champion, and a man known for his kindness and generosity. Yet, despite his global fame, he entered LeBlanc Bistro without any entourage, cameras, or security guards. It was clear he was trying to keep a low profile. The restaurant remained unaware of his presence at first. Lisa watched as he walked toward a quiet corner table and took a seat, adjusting his cap slightly lower. Something about his simple, humble presence struck a chord with Lisa. Unlike many of the rich, arrogant customers who dined there, Dwayne didn't demand attention or special treatment. He just wanted to enjoy his meal in peace. Lisa glanced at the other waiters, but none of them seemed to recognize him. Instead, they were busy fussing over a group of wealthy businessmen who had just walked in. Taking a deep breath, she decided to take his table herself. Approaching with a friendly yet professional demeanor, she smiled and placed a menu in front of him. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to LeBlanc Bistro. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Dwayne looked up, and for a brief second, Lisa saw recognition flash in his eyes. He knew that she knew who he was. "Water's fine for now," he said with a polite smile. Lisa nodded. "Absolutely. I'll be right back." As she walked away, she felt an odd sense of excitement. Meeting a celebrity wasn't what thrilled her. It was the fact that Dwayne Johnson, a man she had admired for years, was as humble in person as he seemed on screen. Lisa returned with his drink and took his order, a simple grilled salmon with roasted vegetables. No extravagant requests, no demanding attitude. Just a normal guy wanting a good meal. She made sure to check on him a few times, ensuring his experience was smooth. And each time, Dwayne thanked her warmly, making conversation in a way that few customers ever did. Unfortunately, someone else had taken notice of her special attention, Richard Whitmore. From across the restaurant, the manager's sharp eyes followed Lisa's movements. He saw the way she took care of the customer, the way she smiled, and, most importantly, he saw that the man sitting in the corner booth was not one of their usual wealthy, white clientele. Richard's jaw tightened. He had warned Lisa before about wasting time on customers who weren't important. In his eyes, this was another example of her failing to prioritize the right people. With an annoyed sigh, he stormed toward her. Lisa had just set down Dwayne's plate when she felt a looming presence behind her. "Lisa!" Richard's voice was cold and clipped. She turned to face him. "Yes, sir? What do you think you're doing?" he asked, glancing at Dwayne as if he were a piece of trash. Lisa frowned. I'm just doing my job, sir. Is there something wrong? Richard crossed his arms. You've been giving this table way too much attention. We have high-profile clients tonight. Stop wasting time here and focus on more important customers. Dwayne, who had been quietly observing the exchange, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Lisa's stomach twisted in frustration. She knew what Richard meant. He didn't think someone like Dwayne, who was dressed casually and wasn't flaunting his wealth, deserved top-tier service. With a professional but firm voice, Lisa replied, I treat all my customers with the same respect, sir. That's part of my job. Richard's nostrils flared. Just do as you're told, he muttered before walking away. Lisa turned back to Dwayne, feeling slightly embarrassed. I'm sorry about that, she said quietly. Dwayne gave her an understanding smile. Don't be. I've seen people like him before. She nodded, relieved that he wasn't offended. She had a feeling that Dwayne had dealt with far worse in his lifetime. As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this night was far from over. Something about the way Richard had looked at her, so full of disapproval, made her uneasy. Little did she know, her entire world was about to change. Lisa continued her shift as if nothing had happened, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was still watching her. She had seen that disapproving look before. She had been on the receiving end of his prejudice more times than she could count. Despite his warning, Lisa made sure to check on Dwayne a few more times, ensuring his meal was perfect. He was appreciative, thanking her each time, and even cracked a joke about how he hadn't had a meal this peaceful in months. As the restaurant buzzed with activity, Lisa was clearing a nearby table when she noticed something unusual. At the far end of the restaurant, a homeless man had wandered in through the front door. His clothes were ragged, his beard was unkempt, and his eyes looked tired and hungry. The man hesitated near the entrance, his gaze scanning the diners as if unsure whether he should be there. Before anyone could react, Richard stormed forward. What do you think you're doing here? Richard barked, his voice loud enough to make some of the nearby customers turn their heads. The homeless man, clearly intimidated, raised his hands slightly. I'm sorry, sir. I was just hoping for some water. Lisa felt a pang of sympathy in her chest. She had seen this man before. His name was George, a veteran who often slept near the bus stop just a few blocks away. He never begged aggressively, never caused trouble. He was just a man down on his luck. Richard scoffed. This is a fine dining establishment. We don't serve beggars. Get out. Lisa saw the way George's face fell. He looked exhausted, and the rejection seemed to cut deeper than just being denied water. It was a reminder that the world saw him as nothing. Something inside Lisa snapped. Before she could think twice, she stepped forward. Wait, she said, her voice firm but not aggressive. Richard turned to her, eyes narrowing. Lisa, stay out of this. But Lisa ignored him. She walked toward the bar, grabbed a glass of water, and brought it over to George. She handed it to him with a small smile. Here you go, sir. George's hands trembled as he took the glass. Thank you, miss, he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. Lisa thought that would be the end of it. She wasn't expecting applause, but she hadn't anticipated what happened next either. Dwayne Johnson steps in. As soon as Lisa turned back to resume her work, Richard grabbed her by the arm. Not harshly, but enough to stop her in place. I told you not to interfere, he hissed. You're embarrassing the restaurant. Lisa pulled her arm free, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. I was just giving him water. Richard's face was red with anger. You don't get to make that decision. You work for me. If you can't follow instructions, then maybe you shouldn't work here at all. At that moment, Dwayne Johnson, who had been quietly watching the entire exchange, stood up. Every head in the restaurant turned as he pushed his chair back, towering over everyone around him. He removed his cap, revealing his unmistakable face. Gasps rippled through the restaurant as people finally recognized who had been dining among them. Richard's expression shifted instantly, from anger to shock. His mouth opened slightly, but he didn't say anything. Dwayne looked at Lisa first, then turned his attention to Richard. His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness beneath it. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. Richard swallowed hard. Mr. Johnson, Dwayne held up a hand, silencing him. He then looked at George, the homeless man who still clutched the glass of water as if unsure whether he should stay or leave. "Sir," Dwayne said to George, "have you eaten today?" George hesitated, clearly embarrassed. "No, sir." Dwayne nodded and turned back to Richard. "Then I'd like to buy him a meal. Is that going to be an issue?" Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew he couldn't. Not with Dwayne Johnson standing in front of him. "No, of course not," Richard finally mumbled, forcing a strained smile. "I'll have the kitchen prepare something right away." Lisa felt a surge of relief but also knew Richard wouldn't forget this moment. The restaurant buzzed with whispers as Dwayne Johnson sat back down, waiting for George's meal to arrive. Lisa served it to him personally, her heart warmed by the kindness she had just witnessed. "Thank you," George said softly. Lisa smiled. "Everyone deserves a little kindness." She turned to leave, but before she could, George hesitated, then spoke again. "You remind me of my daughter," he said quietly. "She always used to say that, too." Lisa felt her chest tighten, but she just nodded and gave him one last smile before heading back to her other tables. Everything seemed to have settled, until Lisa was called into the manager's office at the end of her shift. Richard sat behind his desk, arms crossed. "Close the door," he said coldly. Lisa complied, already sensing what was coming. Richard let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his temples. "Lisa, you've been a problem since the moment you started working here." She stiffened. "A problem?" "Yes, you don't follow orders. You don't prioritize the right customers. And tonight, you embarrassed me in front of one of the biggest celebrities in the world." Lisa clenched her fists. "I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself by treating people like they don't matter." Richard's eyes flashed with anger. "That's it. You're fired." The words hit Lisa like a slap. Even though she had expected it, it still stung. "You're firing me because I gave someone water?" she asked, her voice steady but low. "I'm firing you because you don't belong here," Richard replied coldly. Lisa felt her stomach drop. She knew what he meant. For a moment, she considered arguing. She considered pointing out how unfair this was. But she knew it wouldn't matter. People like Richard didn't listen. Instead, she simply nodded, removed her apron, and placed it on his desk. "I'll get my things." She turned and walked out without another word. Lisa stepped outside the restaurant into the cool night air, her heart pounding. She felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and uncertainty. She had just lost her job for doing the right thing. What now? As she stood there, lost in thought, a deep voice spoke behind her. "Lisa." She turned around and found herself face to face with Dwayne Johnson. And what he said next would change her life forever. Lisa stood outside the restaurant, her apron still clenched in her hands. The cold night air brushed against her skin, but it wasn't the chill that sent shivers down her spine. It was the reality sinking in. She had just been fired for doing the right thing. A wave of emotions hit her all at once. Anger, frustration, sadness. But more than anything, she felt a deep sense of injustice. Was kindness really something to be punished for? She was so lost in thought that she barely noticed the towering figure stepping out of the restaurant behind her. "Lisa!" The deep, familiar voice cut through the night, and she turned sharply. Standing just a few feet away was Dwayne Johnson. Her breath hitched. "Mr. Johnson?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Dwayne gave her a small smile. "I saw what happened in there," he said, "and I just want you to know, you did the right thing." Lisa exhaled shakily. "Tell that to my landlord when I can't pay rent next month." Dwayne let out a small chuckle, but there was understanding in his eyes. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, I don't say this lightly, but I respect people who stand up for others. You didn't hesitate to help that man tonight, even when it cost you your job. That tells me everything I need to know about you. Lisa looked away, embarrassed by the praise. I was just doing what any decent person would do. You'd be surprised how many people wouldn't, Dwayne replied. Lisa let out a sigh. I don't regret helping him, she admitted, but I have no idea what I'm going to do now. Jobs like this aren't easy to come by. Dwayne studied her for a moment, then pulled something out of his pocket, a business card. He handed it to her. I might be able to help with that, he said. Lisa hesitated before taking the card. She glanced down at it. The logo at the top was one she recognized instantly, $7 Productions. Her head snapped back up. Wait, isn't this your production company? Dwayne grinned. Yep. Lisa blinked in disbelief. Why are you giving this to me? Because I think you deserve better than working for people like Richard, Dwayne said. I don't know what your plans were before this job, but I can tell you have a good heart, and I like having people like that on my team. Lisa stared at him, completely speechless. Of course, he continued with a playful smirk. I'm not saying you'll be starring in any movies just yet, but I can offer you a job, something stable, something where you'll be treated with respect. What do you say? Lisa felt her heart racing. This had to be a dream, right? One minute, she was just another waitress trying to survive, and the next, Dwayne Johnson was offering her a job at his company? Her mind raced with a million thoughts, but in the end, there was only one answer. Yes, she said, her voice firm despite her shock. Absolutely, yes. Dwayne grinned. That's what I like to hear. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, Richard paced his office, still fuming over what had happened. He had been humiliated in front of a celebrity, and even worse, he had no idea how much damage had just been done to his reputation. The moment Dwayne Johnson left, word spread like wildfire among the customers. People whispered. Some even recorded the entire incident. Within hours, social media was flooded with posts calling out the restaurant's mistreatment of Lisa and the homeless veteran. #JusticeForLisa began trending. Negative reviews poured in. Loyal customers vowed never to return. By morning, news outlets had picked up the story. The restaurant, once known for its exclusivity, was now infamous for its discrimination and mistreatment of employees. Richard had fired Lisa, thinking it would make his business run smoother. He had no idea it would nearly destroy it instead. A few days later, Lisa found herself standing in front of the $7 Productions office in Los Angeles. She took a deep breath before walking inside. Dwayne had been true to his word. She was officially hired as an assistant on one of his upcoming projects. It wasn't glamorous, but it was more than she had ever expected. More importantly, for the first time in her life, she felt valued. She hadn't just landed a new job, she had gained a new future. The morning after Lisa's firing, news spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with outrage. Customers who had witnessed the incident posted videos of Richard humiliating Lisa and Dwayne Johnson stepping in to defend her. #JusticeForLisa was trending across platforms, and people from all over the country were calling out the restaurant for its unfair treatment of employees. By midday, local news stations picked up the story. Soon, national media outlets ran headlines like, "Waitress fired for helping veteran. Dwayne Johnson intervenes. Celebrity calls out restaurant for mistreating staff. Outrage as kind-hearted waitress loses job over compassion." It didn't take long before customers started canceling their reservations. The once exclusive restaurant, known for attracting high-end clientele, was now infamous for scandal and mistreatment. Then the real fallout began. 2 days after Lisa's firing, an attorney contacted her. The homeless veteran, whose life she had changed with a simple meal, had seen the news reports and felt deeply moved by how she had sacrificed her job for him. "Lisa, we have a case," the attorney said. "Your firing was unfair, and we believe it was a clear case of wrongful termination." At first, Lisa hesitated. She wasn't someone who wanted revenge. But then she thought about all the other employees Richard had mistreated. She thought about how he had yelled at the cooks, berated the waitstaff, and used fear to control his workers. It wasn't just about her anymore. So she agreed. The lawsuit was filed, and soon, even more former employees came forward. They shared their own horror stories of low wages, unfair treatment, and verbal abuse. Some even revealed that Richard had been caught illegally deducting tips from the staff's paychecks. Suddenly, the lawsuit wasn't just about Lisa. It was about years of mistreatment coming to light. Within weeks, the restaurant was drowning in negative publicity. Investors pulled out, suppliers cut ties, and even the landlord threatened to evict Richard for violating ethical business standards. Then came the biggest blow of all. After reviewing the evidence, the labor board ruled in Lisa's favor. Not only did Richard have to pay Lisa a settlement, but the restaurant was also forced to shut down due to multiple labor violations. In just a matter of weeks, Richard lost everything. And Lisa, she was just getting started. Meanwhile, Lisa had started her new job at $7 Productions. She wasn't an actress, nor was she directing films, but she had something she never had before: a career with real opportunities. Dwayne Johnson personally checked in on her progress. One afternoon, he called her into his office. "How's the new job treating you?" he asked with his signature grin. Lisa smiled. "Honestly, still feels like a dream. I wake up every day excited to go to work." Dwayne nodded. "That's what I like to hear." Then his expression turned serious. "Listen, I know you probably weren't looking for all this attention, but people love your story. They see you as an example of kindness and standing up for what's right. I think there's something powerful in that." Lisa tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Dwayne leaned forward. "I want to give you a bigger role here. Not just an assistant job, but something that lets you use your voice. How do you feel about working with our outreach program? We help struggling communities, mentor young people, and give back. I think you'd be perfect for it." Lisa's eyes widened. "You want me to help change lives?" "Yeah," Dwayne said, "because that's exactly what you did for that veteran. You changed his life in one moment. Imagine what you could do if you made that your mission." Lisa felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had always been someone who cared about others, but she had never imagined turning that into a career. And yet, here she was, being given a chance to do something bigger than herself. She smiled. "I'd love that." Months passed, and Lisa thrived in her new position. She traveled with $7 Productions, helping with charity events, mentoring underprivileged youth, and even starting an initiative to support homeless veterans. Then one day she got a surprise. Sitting in the lobby of her office was the same homeless veteran she had helped that night. But he looked completely different. He was clean-shaven, wearing new clothes, and had a proud smile on his face. Lisa gasped. "Oh my God, it's you." The man grinned. "It's me. I wanted to come thank you personally. Because of you, I got the help I needed. A shelter took me in, and now I have a job and an apartment." Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes. "That's amazing." The man nodded. "And it's all because you cared. You changed my life, Lisa." Lisa swallowed the lump in her throat. She had taken a chance that night, and it had led to something greater than she ever imagined. As the man walked away, Lisa took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. She had lost her job that night, but she had gained something far more valuable: a purpose. And in the end, that was worth everything. If you like this story, please like and share it. Don't forget to subscribe our channel.